It goes without saying that one of the saddest stories in Formula One is Vettel's retirement. However, is he really retiring forever, or is he taking a short sabbatical and will aim to return to the sport as a racing driver sooner rather than later? Furthermore, if he fails to achieve this feat, is it possible that we will see Vettel as a manager in one of the teams in which he previously raced? Vettel has had a fantastic F1 season as of now, and while many think that he has already said what he has to say, they are in for a huge surprise. Vettel debuted back in 2007 and is one of the few drivers that were able to score points on their debut, scoring 1 point with BMW in the US GP. In 2008, Vettel scored the first win for Toro Rosso, and it was quite ironic given the fact that Red Bull hasn't scored a win up until this point, but their sister company, the inferior one, did. Vettel was promoted to Red Bull in 2009, and he was close to winning the championship in his first season with the Austrian team, which would have been an amazing feature as well. Still, Vettel managed to win 4 championships in a row with Red Bull in what turned out to be pure dominance from the Austrian team. Nonetheless, starting in 2015, Vettel decided to switch teams and join Ferrari, a team with which he spent 6 years but failed to win a championship. He came close in 2018, but mechanical and reliability issues also played a role in Vettel's championship campaign, which he labeled as a failure later in his career. Nevertheless, Vettel's resume is quite impressive, and he was able to establish himself as one of the greatest drivers out there, with 53 wins and 57 pole positions in his career. It was clear that he struggled for pace at Aston Martin because the team was dysfunctional and they were unable to build a proper car for the 2 seasons that Vettel spent with them. Now that he is leaving the team, one can't help but wonder, what's next for the 4-time world champion? He's managed to turn himself into one of the most lovable people on the grid after being one of the most hated during his days at Red Bull and Ferrari. Multi 21 is one of the darkest spots in Vettel's career, with him defying team orders and passing Webber, his teammate, in Malaysia in 2013. But now Vettel is more focused on the environment and the global picture of the sport, which is why he's been promoted as one of the greatest ambassadors of the F1 sport along with Hamilton. According to the 7-time world champion, Vettel still has a huge chance of making a comeback in the sport as a racing driver, which is some of the greatest news we've heard in a while. Obviously, Vettel is a family man and wants to spend some time with his family, given how excruciating it is to visit race after race, weekend after weekend, throughout the whole continent. But Hamilton thinks that Formula One has a way of drawing you back to the sport, something that he really thinks will happen with Vettel in time to come. I was just sitting here thinking most drivers are coming back, like he's coming back. You're probably going to come back. We're seeing other drivers coming back, so I'm sitting here kind of accepting, yes, it's your last race, but you'll be back. Formula One has a way of sucking you back in, and we've noticed that from so many other drivers. If this does not happen, it is obvious that Vettel will look into management positions in the future, but we'll get into that later in this video because we still want to tell you more about him coming back as a racing driver. Everyone is expecting Audi to make a huge boom in the sport when they arrive in 2026, and quite frankly, Audi is a team that would probably look to have an all-German lineup for the first season. This is something that Mercedes experienced in 2010 after completing a buyout to Braun GP in 2009, and it's likely that Audi would prefer to have. According to Ralf Schumacher, who is also a close friend of Sebastian Vettel and the brother of Vettel's mentor, Michael Schumacher, he doesn't think that Vettel is done with this sport. Still, he added that time will tell whether a comeback would be the right thing to do for Vettel, further collaborating. Sebastian Vettel is a 4-time world champion who has achieved great things. Formula One will miss Sebastian Vettel as a person. Unfortunately, things didn't go quite so well for him with Aston Martin. I would have wished differently for him. A comeback by Sebastian in Formula One cannot be ruled out. You can see that now again with Hülkenberg and Alonso, who's always keen to come back or to continue. Sebastian, with his vast experience, already has the chance to come back in a year or 2 and race at the front. Whether he'll actually do that then, I don't know. Maybe after a year or 2 with his family, he'll have the strength to make a comeback. When Vettel announced his retirement from Aston Martin, he was asked about his potential replacement, and with a slight bias, he added that Mick Schumacher would be the ideal candidate to drive the Aston Martin car in the future. Unfortunately for him and Mick, Aston Martin did not want to do this, instead opting for a two-time world champion in Alonso. This, however, shows that Vettel would be delighted to work with Mick, and given that Mick does not have a seat for the foreseeable future, there is a good chance that we'll see Mick and Vettel as teammates in Audi, a team that is looking to make a big splash in F1 when the new technical regulations kick in 2026. But if Vettel doesn't make a return to F1 regarding the starting role, and indeed opt out to be a manager on some level, what are his options? There's always the possibility of becoming a team principal at Ferrari, and while this is a far-fetched scenario, and Vettel becoming team principal immediately after retiring from a starting seat would be something of a one-of-a-kind scenario, it's not impossible. Still, Ferrari is looking to sign Frédéric Vasseur or Maurizio Arrivabene to this role, which is why Vettel probably won't even be considered in the first place. But there is another management role that Vettel could fit very well into, and that's taking over the scouting role of Helmut Marko. Helmut said that this is something he and Vettel discussed in the past, and now that Vettel is retired from the sport, there is always the chance that he'll replace Marko. After all, this is a school that Vettel has graduated from, just like Ricciardo and Verstappen, and nothing would delight Vettel more than picking his own talents when it comes to driving in F1. Helmut Marko spoke about this situation, adding, "It's not excluded that Vettel will return to a position in management. I am almost 80, so that would be something. We discussed it and I think such a position would appeal to him. That came up in that conversation between us. I am convinced that the potential and the personality are there. But now we'll let him plant some trees and then we'll see what happens." All in all, Vettel's future is very interesting and uncertain at the same time, but we cannot wait to see what his decision will be regarding racing again. Obviously, he won't race in 2023, but that doesn't mean he won't race in 2024 and follow in the footsteps of Alonso, who took a break in 2019 and 2020 before returning to Alpine in 2021. Vettel spoke about his future and what his plans are now that he's retired, hinting at a potential comeback, adding, "I think you naturally do look at other stuff. I don't know the answer yet. I quite look forward to the idea of nothing at first and then see what it does to me. There's lots of things in my head as well, other interests and ideas outside racing. But yeah, obviously I've done this for so long and it's been central to my life, so it will be difficult to say that I'm not going to miss it, but how much and whether then I start to look at something else, we'll see how it goes." What do you think is next for the full-time world champion? Do you think that he has a chance of competing yet again in the sport in a team that could compete for wins? Let us know in the comments below.